Do not tell me that a multi-billionaire is so dumb that he was videoing himself in the massage parlor, soliciting prostitution.
This is Rhodium Radio, a place where we explore ideas and challenge your worldview. For more episodes, go to rhodiumradio.com.
America is a theocracy. God is money.
Most information these days is being weaponized.
I think Chris used to deny climate change. He acknowledges it, but he's not sure it's man-made. Is that accurate?
We like to act like science is this perfect thing, but science has been wrong a lot.
The wealth gap is not sustainable. You're going to end up with a revolution on your hands.
In today's episode, we're talking about surveillance. Is the level of surveillance we see in China coming to America? Is it already here, like what we're seeing in a recent Georgetown law report about Detroit and Chicago with their facial recognition system rollout? And are Americans giving up privacy for freedom? We've got a great show. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor for today's show, Anthony's Key Resort. I personally love to scuba dive. And these days, when you go diving, there's something that totally makes it satisfying. You actually see coral that's alive and you see lots of fish. You know, so many places you go diving, you're like, what happened here? Well, Anthony's Key on the island of Rhodium, Honduras, just a couple-hour flight from the States, is home to the second largest barrier reef on the planet. The resort and the diving consistently rank in the top, journals like Travel and Leisure, TripAdvisor, National Geographic. And, they've got whale sharks that seem like they're common visitors now, and they're always taking pictures and showing these. And their dolphin experience is pretty awesome. They don't lock the dolphins in, so the dolphins can come and go, and it's as close as I've ever been to dolphins, so I think you'll dig it. And obviously, last but not least, there's amazing food, amazing weather, clear water, lots of sunshine, and some of the only overwater bungalows you'll find outside of Bora Bora, which make it pretty awesome. So go to anthonyskey.com, mention Rhodium on the website or by phone, and they said they will take care of you. And ain't nobody gonna surveil you underwater except a few sharks.
And Chris loves secret surveillance.
Love it. Need more of it. It's gonna be hugely popular.
China? You're up.
I'm leading us in with China?
No.
Oh,
we definitely need to touch on that, but...
Okay, I'm gonna lead us in with craft. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So I was absolutely shocked a few weeks ago, as many people did. I heard that Bob Kraft got arrested for soliciting prostitution. And it was at the strip mall massage parlor, which we all tend to probably know. That's where you go to get, services.
Also known as rub and tugs.
That's right. But here's the thing. So I was like a little bit curious, like that's interesting. He's a billionaire. Why is he going to that cheap strip mall massage parlor? But what really blew my mind was a few days later, I read an article that detailed, because I heard they had video of it. And I thought, do not tell me that a multi-billionaire is so dumb that he was videoing himself in the massage parlor, soliciting prostitution. But it made no sense, because I'm like, how do you get video? Well, a few days later, an article came out that detailed how they got video. And the way they did it was using something called a sneak and peek warrant. And what happened is that after 9/11, the government gave certain capabilities to law enforcement, specifically the FBI mostly, to, under the ruse of something, gain access to private people's homes or businesses, install cameras without their knowledge, and then use that in order to stop terrorism. And of course, like most things with the government, it has run awry, and they used a sneak and peek warrant. They surveilled this massage parlor for months. They would pull people over when they leave and question them about what went on, and then use that person as an informant. They got enough information that they went before a judge and got a sneak and peek warrant. They basically went to the two people that were at the massage parlor, made a ruse that there was a bomb threat, evacuated them from the facility, installed cameras where they then watched for months, and eventually got Bob Kraft and a lot of other people on tape soliciting, as my friend Tim calls it, a rug and tug. So that absolutely blew my mind. Not that it happened, that it was just really minor news. In this day and age, with surveillance gone awry and WikiLeaks and Snowden, I just thought, how are we not hearing about this like we did with Snowden? It was such a little thing. And just in the past couple of days, the judge has thrown out the surveillance evidence, said they did not meet the details of the warrant or whatever. But I would tell you that's only because Bob Kraft was involved.
Oh, guaranteed.
If it was regular people, they'd be sitting in jail because nobody cares. And the reality is, my problem with the surveillance used by the government, and we can kind of go from here, is people are so bad at like, well, you shouldn't be soliciting prostitution. They deserve to be caught. But it's just such a slippery slope. Today, they're going to be getting Bob Kraft for getting a rug and tug. Tomorrow, they're going to be getting you, oh, wait, they already do, for running a red light. And before we know it, it'll be, oh, Chris said some things we don't like. Let's go give him a misdemeanor.
Minority Report.
Is there anywhere in the world that's testing this technology?
Well, China is not testing it. I'll say they're perfecting it. You know, they have this minority group. I believe they're called the Uyghurs.
Uyghurs, yeah.
They're a Muslim minority who typically have been left alone to their own devices because they were kind of out in the countryside and no one was worried about them. But now China's kind of clamping down on them, and they've created this system that watches your every movement. So they have these storefront police stations like every couple blocks. They have cameras that scan your face, facial recognition cameras. They scan your ID. And then if you are breaking any of their quote unquote rules, you are put into what they call re-education camps, which are supposedly to re-educate you for different jobs. But people say it's actually about re-education so that they are more aligned with the Han Chinese. And they're taking this technology and they're also selling it to other countries. It's a very scary thing. And a lot of people say, well, you know, these countries are out of control with their surveillance of the people. But here in America, we don't have that level of surveillance. But I would argue we do here in America. We have the guise of no surveillance. Like I say, Snowden exposed a lot of surveillance that was taking place of American citizens that we were unaware of.
Right. Oh, absolutely did. After you had, I think, President Obama and the director of the CIA totally deny it in front of everyone. We are not listening. And then we find out, oh, they absolutely are.
Right.
The thing in China that's interesting is it feels like an experiment to me. Mm-hmm. And this may be hate speech, but I feel like we develop these technologies, the majority of them in the United States. Mm-hmm. China has been the place where we manufacture the equipment, and then they're known for intellectual property theft. And now they're testing out all these things and selling them to the rest of the world. I think they used in that New York Times piece the example of the Olympics, which made me even wonder, was it all just to show people,
showcase, and which
dystopian technology?
Wait, what was the Olympics thing?
Basically, that they brought all these countries, they welcomed them in, and then took them straight to, hey, we want to show you our surveillance labs.
Oh, yeah.
Because at the Olympics, it's everyone approves it because you can't have any terrorist attacks.
Yeah, safety.
So you have to have this facial recognition, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is really." So,
is there any reasonable way that the government can use video surveillance, or we think?
Well, I think the example. Well, the example in China, I think, is they're using it to persecute people. And they're picking off a random minority religion now. You could do that anywhere in the world.
Anywhere.
So it's a religious issue. I think that's on the table. This is an ideology.
This isn't a new idea. If you go back in America to the 60s, with COINTELPRO, where they were watching, quote unquote, what they call them? I forget the term they used. Was it black nationalists? I don't even know what they called them. But the Black Panthers, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, all these groups, the FBI was listening, watching. They put moles inside their organizations. So this isn't a new idea. It's just the technology has advanced, and so now we have more means of watching people, listening to people. And like you said, most of the technology is actually developed in America. So the technology that's in China is being sold to them by American companies.
And so, do we think it's only happening there, or do you think it's happening here? But you're going to tell us something different.
Well, I'm going to say I love video surveillance of police officers.
Of them or by them?
Yes. It's of them and by them. Meaning, I want every police in America to wear a body camera that's on all the time, and it puts it up into a cloud that I can go and click on it and watch it immediately all the time. So that's what I'm trying to figure out, because there are some things about video surveillance that I understand. Like if you say, I think I mentioned before, I'm a home builder. I don't put up video cameras at my job sites to deter criminals, because the criminal might not even see it. But I definitely put a sign up that says video surveillance 24/7. And I believe it deters criminals. So I say that because I don't want the government to not have any video surveillance. I just think, like we've talked about before, we have to make sure we monitor it. But don't you guys like that police are surveilled?
But they're not.
Right.
Well,
That's a
I'm just
neat
saying,
idea.
but we definitely have seen a growth in it. I just watched a video today. I don't know if you saw it, Tim. This lady gets shot 5 times point blank by a police officer. It was on cell phone video, which I think is a great form. I mean, we had it. I wish that cop was wearing a body camera. And unfortunately, in most cases, they don't release the cameras till way later.
Like a year
so, like, in
later.
America, my point is, I don't think we can fight video surveillance. I don't believe it. I believe that we're going to have it. We already have it. I agree with that. But I do think that we need to make sure that the government isn't the sole overseer of that surveillance. So,
I disagree. I think we can fight it. I just heard that San Francisco was the first city to ban facial recognition cameras to be being used.
and again, that's a great point. I think facial recognition, that's a dangerous slope. But you don't want to ban police officers from having body cameras, do you?
No, I think it's a great thing for them. I mean,
Wouldn't it be even better if they were live, uploaded to a cloud that you could watch all the time?
it's good.
See, I feel like you're using a neat political idea to sell out a country. But don't our police officers need to monitor what we do?
But the people need to have oversight of their government. It's the
That's
same reason
great.
I like C-SPAN. It's boring, but anytime you want to see what's going on with our government in Congress, you can turn on C-SPAN and watch it. We have access to that. I wish that congressmen had to wear body cameras when they went and talked to lobbyists. That'd be interesting.
That's
That'd be a
interesting.
good form of surveillance.
Like I say, really, surveillance should be going the opposite
Opposite
direction.
way. That's my
The
point.
people surveilling their public servants.
That's right.
Not public servants surveilling their people.
Yes, that is my proposal. I knew we were going to talk about this, and I was thinking, like, am I really against it? And the truth is, I just know it actually, and I've read some things like, oh, it's never been proven to be a deterrent. No, I disagree. It's a deterrent for a lot of people. I think we're going to begin to see deterrents of police. And like you said, I think that the way we need to approach this is, yes, let's have video surveillance.
Well, I would say we would begin to see deterrent if we actually
cared.
not even cared if they were held accountable when we saw videos come out of police doing egregious things, and the police unions and the police themselves back these people and say, well, no, they were justified in their actions, when clearly that fails the eye test. They were not justified in their actions.
And I just like this idea of surveilling. I mean, literally, Congress could pass a law that says we're not going to ban lobbyists, but it is a law that if you meet with a lobbyist, you must record that conversation. And then, again, of course, you'd say, well, some people would abuse it. Yeah, let's fine them, let's fire them, and let's put them in jail. But boy, I think that our government would change pretty quickly if we made that law. It would be a lot harder for them to meet with them, and we'd have access to it. And with the technology we have today, immediately it uploads, and you can go listen. Say, that Congressman so-and-so from Georgia met with the Lockheed Martin lobbyist, and here's the recording. Oh, great. Let me go listen to that. Let me see what they talked about.
Okay, let's come back out of the clouds now, back into the real world. That is great. I mean, that's a fantastic idea.
That'd be the right way to use it.
Yeah, but I think the issue right now is this country is being surveilled on a level no one really comprehends. I mean, every keystroke, every text, every phone call, every transaction, talking and ads start coming up on your Instagram. At what point does privacy just become you're under control? You're being manipulated.
Wait, were you describing China or America? I wasn't sure.
Oh.
Well, I would say the difference
Facebook.
is, at least on base level, right, it goes back to this private versus government conversation. Most of what you named, most people would readily admit is happening in the private sector. Like, yes, Apple is listening to my phone. Yes, Google is marking my every keystroke. The question is, does the government do those things as well, and or does Google just share all that information?
Oh, wait, that's a question?
I think Snowden
I thought Snowden
knows
answered that question for us.
I agree.
And they store it in
And
Utah.
what happened? Like,
Nothing.
I'm like, nothing happened.
Nothing happened. Yeah, he was labeled a terrorist and had to flee for his
I know,
his
and
life.
to this day, he can't come back to America.
Yeah.
And you know what's crazy about that? It's one that, from my more conservative roots a long time ago, when it happened, I was still in this like kind of like, oh, let me figure out where I am. And like today, it's like it's absurd that he's not back here labeled a hero, in my opinion. And it really blows my mind. I run this by a lot of like my more conservative friends, and a lot of them agree with that.
Agree with?
Yeah, like he probably did us a great service. But then how are we still having, meaning who's keeping him out of, like, how is this not?
The establishment that likes to, or benefits from surveilling us.
Yeah, I mean, he is.
So what do you think though? Like I oftentimes tend to be don't fight it if it's unwinnable. Just figure out how you can like benefit from it in your life. I mean, do we think we're fighting it? Like you said, Snowden exposed it. Nothing happened. I mean, that's why I say like let's try to do something that we could get good. But I don't think you're going to fight that the government gets to see what you search on the internet.
But see, I think that's the problem with a lot of with people these days, that we think that these fights are, well, that's not a winnable fight, so why even fight that fight? But you know, there's these ebbs and flows to the laws that we live by. You know, just like a few years ago, it was, I mean, abortion was something that was very legal. It's very legal. Now we're at the precipice where it's like, well, abortion might become illegal again. Although that's something people thought that could never happen again, or people thought Nazis wouldn't come back. But
I'm not saying we don't fight for anything. My question is, how would you even go about fighting this? I mean, what are we setting as like the government shouldn't have any access to information?
Very limited.
I mean, they have access to all information. I think that's the concern. It's every, and I think the problem is we've now made technology sexy enough to where it's, hey, talk to this speaker. It'll order your groceries. But we're also listening.
But this is one of those things that I think it's not a new problem.
Surveillance?
It's not even a relatively new problem. I would tell you is, you think it's ever been hard for the government to get a warrant to come search your home?
But it's not that.
No, I know they didn't do it because the manpower, but that's where I say the problem goes back to, we've given government the power to do anything they want.
Sure, especially after 9/11. 9/11.
So I don't want to fight surveillance because it's such a niche-y little thing that I got to convince somebody to not have Alexa in their home. You know, to not, it's like, no, what I feel like I could win is don't let the government into our lives the way they're into it.
But you act like we let the Patriot Act go through.
No, but we did let the government get warrants on anything they want.
But that was in the Patriot Act.
Far before the Patriot Act. The government could come and say, I think Tim's running drugs out of his house. What evidence do you have? He drives a nice car. Okay, here's a warrant. And that crap's been going on a long time. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying that's the problem.
Yeah, I
yes, it's become evident in this new problem, but the problem is that the government, in the guise of protection, is allowed to do anything they want. And today, it's become easier than ever, because before, how many houses could they get a search warrant for and execute? Well, very few. How many phone calls can they listen to? All of them.
Well, historically, that's been a thing in America is, you paint this narrative that people should be scared of something, and then give us the right to check that thing, and we'll keep you safe. Just, you know, as far back as you go. So it was like, first, you know, at one point in time, it was a communist. Communists were very dangerous. Well, everyone was like, well, yeah, do whatever you need to look at the communist. And, you know, then at one point in time, it was, you know, the black people. It's like, oh, well, look at them. Yeah,
and like we do this like right now. Why do you think most people are okay with the government surveilling our phone calls and our internet searches? What are they scared of?
Because we're so distracted by... I mean, okay, there's two camps. There's one, I don't care, just let me watch or play my video games or whatever.
But that camp isn't involved no matter what.
Yeah, that's fair. But that's a large and growing segment.
I agree. But the segment that is involved...
I'm afraid of the brown people.
Right now, and that's terrorism.
That's terrorism.
How long do we have to be afraid of it? But we had one terrorist attack.
No, the crazier thing is that...
We had one terrorist attack almost 20 years ago.
First of all...
And we're still not upset that surveillance.
That's a bad argument.
First of all, we haven't had one terrorist attack.
First of all, Tim,
we have a terrorist attack every other week.
I agree. Now, you know the government defines, if it's a white guy, it's called domestic terrorism. And if it's anything else, it's like scary terrorism.
No. It's not domestic terrorism. It's mental illness is what it is.
But the problem with that argument, Chris, is that's what they're going to use. You know, it's been a long time since we've had a terrorist event. We've saved these Americans from so many of them they know nothing about. And now they're starting to question us. I mean, this is the argument of false flags that we get into wars. You know, that's we're safe. Oh, no, you're not safe. See?
Mm-hmm, right.
So I have an argument with,
But that's where I tell, and I love, and listen, I know we all agree on this. That's why everybody has to watch Minority Report. Because you can't give the government the power to prevent things. We have to, as a society, try to prevent things, no doubt. But the government is not really in the prevent business. They shouldn't be. And if you think they should be, you need to go watch Minority Report. Right? I mean, that's what I'm saying is, yes, I agree. That's the problem. The American people, because of what Tim said, I think he's right. The government lays out this, you should be scared of this thing, but we can prevent it. Just give up all your rights.
That is the narrative.
The government should not be in the prevent business. They shouldn't prevent drugs from being sold. They shouldn't prevent people from having sex with other people. They shouldn't prevent. We can decide as society, if you do this, there are consequences. But we cannot decide as society, if somebody thinks about doing this or says they're going to do this, there are consequences. That's a slippery slope.
But you know,
Fear does run the narrative.
That's the thing that actually confuses me a little bit because what's that? To catch a predator, right? Those guys are arrested and charged because they showed up at a young child's house with the intention, believed intention of having sex or something along those lines, and they go to jail for that. But when it comes to our politicians, intent doesn't matter because, like in the Mueller report, they said that they tried to obstruct justice, they just didn't accomplish their goal, so they're not guilty. So how is it? When do we choose that your intent matters versus actually carrying through with the crime?
If it's something that most people look down at. I mean, I really believe that. Like, most people look down at, obviously, child sex offender. So they go, well, that's okay because they're using that against the bad people. Most people look down at terrorism. Oh, that's okay because I don't like Muslim terrorists. But the minute it starts to be pointed at you, people go, and that's where I like your statement that you refer to a lot. Like, first they came for this group of people, and I didn't say, because eventually there's nobody left. And that's why I say, I feel like that's what's going on with government surveillance is we just have to be very clear right now that the government has made us scared of something to the point that we've given up all of the rights with no end date.
Correct.
Like, I go back and say, look, when 9/11 happened, I don't think there's any of us here who didn't have some sense of fear. Like, we didn't know if that was a little thing. We didn't know if it was a big thing. I mean, you just didn't know. And so most people understand, like, in times of war or extreme fear, the government probably needs to do something. It's what curfews do. Pretty much every civilized society, when it gets out of control, they institute a curfew.
It shows you how fragile people are in a crisis.
And I don't love that, but I get it. But you can't say we're going to have a curfew for how long? Till we don't need it. Mm-hmm. What if they never went away? That's what I feel like happened.
But I remember when 9/11 happened and it started going with the Patriot Act and all these things. I remember there was a group of people, and I was in this camp where I was like, no, you can't give away all these freedoms because they're going to be abused. We've proven time and time again, the government consistently abuses those privileges.
Absolutely.
So we shouldn't give, like you said, you should always operate on principle, right? So what is the principle you're operating under for surveillance or for whatever the situation is, because the principles don't change. It's my opinion.
The problem right now is you have both the private sector and then they're, obviously with all of Snowden's leaks, they're sharing or selling data to the largest spy organization on earth, the CIA, NSA, all in between. So you have it's like this all in America, hey, the money's in data. And now you have this race for artificial intelligence to manage all the data. And the problem they're starting to find with the artificial intelligence to manage all the big data, which it cannot exist without big data, is, the artificial intelligence can be racist.
Yeah.
The artificial intelligence starts to make judgment calls. I just heard on these unmanned aircraft, they're giving them the kill switch.
What?
And they said in the Constitution, it's supposed to be a person. But they're like, well, if this computer can make the judgment call better than us. And the problem is, it's all made by someone. Whoever the programmers are God. Mm-hmm. And they're figuring out these things. That's why they're concerned in China.
I don't even know. I mean, with our AI, the scary part is that programmers can know that they, like, as a group, we've decided that statistics are tricky, right? Like, I believe we all admit, like, hey, statistics can be tricky. I could use a statistic to prove a point in a tricky way. So, like, this goes back to, like, if you're trying to stop, we'll call it Muslim terrorism in America, the statistics would tell you probably need to, at the airport, search one specific group of people, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Like we said,
without any emotion and freedoms and Constitution.
If you were trying to meaning as a human being, if you put me in charge with no Constitution or anything like that, and you said, stop school shootings, do you think I'm looking at women at all?
No.
And do you think that's smart?
Yeah, you're profiling.
Yeah. But as a human, I have to apply the Constitution, which says I cannot profile, I cannot do these things. I take all that in. And so I try to design a system, even though it would impair women, right? I just have to try to make it as fair as possible. But I don't know that AI machines can do that, right? Because they're going to look at the data and say, the data says we don't need to worry about women. The data says in school shootings, we don't need to worry about black people. The data says it's white males. And that's what's scary, because that's actually correct. To try to stop school shootings in the most efficient way possible, you would monitor just one group. And I think that's what scares me about machines. They don't care if they're biased that way. And I think we should care, even if it inconveniences all of us. Like, I think it's good that we search. I mean, if you're going to search people at the airport, you got to search everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue where you have a constitution, these systems that are running all the surveillance, they aren't hitting a filter. How does this compare with the Constitution? And then going back, it's just, what is the data? Says. What's the probabilities? Yeah, I don't know.
It's a hard job, though. I always say, I try to be like, your job is to stop terrorism, whether it be domestic or, that's a tough job. You see why they start doing it. It's like, look, if your job in the government is to stop a terrorist attack after 9/11, it is a lot easier to do if you're listening to phone calls and can have a computer flag anything that says bomb or Allah or, it's a lot easier. I mean, that's just a fact. Or, It
was interesting. I was listening to an interview with Snowden. He said, this is such a delicate topic because privacy and liberty go hand in hand. You give up privacy, you give up your freedom. You want more privacy? He said, you're actually safer having more privacy because people know less of how to manipulate it. Because the argument of all this is there are very powerful people who can manipulate the data. See, even the argument of the machines are making judgment calls based on probabilities and data. Somebody's entering the data.
Are they? Now, I don't know. I mean, I listen to enough of the futurist stuff where it's like, we are in the realm right now of having computers invent computers. And this is where a guy like Ray Kurzweil says the explosion of AI is going to happen in a way nobody understands, because we've always had humans making computers. So a human would make a computer, and then we'd use that computer and say, oh, we can make it a little better. But it's still a human trying to make the computer better. We're entering a realm where computers are making computers, and we're going to lose touch with what they're doing. We don't know if it's telling you to use the Constitution or, if we're talking about these type of issues. I mean, he talks more, obviously, technology stuff, but it's like he talks about it in a positive light, which I think it could be and in a lot of ways will be. But in a lot of ways, it's really scary because we don't know what those, and it's like every future movie shows that. In the end, they go, these humans are going to kill themselves. Let's eliminate them.
Well, that was what's interesting about that New York Times piece in China. They said there's just hundreds and hundreds of cameras everywhere, that everything is being tracked, that they're using all this stuff against their own citizens, that in essence, this whole province has become a prison. And they even said it, this is a dystopian model.
Yeah, I think
they're exporting to the whole world.
Yeah, I think one guy said his commute from his house to his job was like a 6-block commute or something like that, or maybe 6 minutes, I don't remember. But in that distance, he encounters 128 cameras.
Well, and China is, I agree, obviously America has this problem. China is a whole nother level. I've never been, but that in that thing, he was a reporter. He's also being followed all the time by 7 police officers.
Yeah.
Forget the cameras. It's like, because he's a Western journalist, it's like, man.
Well, because he was out where the Uyghurs are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, oh, he's a suspicious guy. And I'm like, but it's like, it's funny because I know, Tim, you always relate, and I think, oh man, I can't imagine what that'd be like. Well, there's probably some people here in America who can imagine what that's like. I don't know, just the thought. Yeah, I bet you there's some people who feel like they're followed quite a bit.
There was this thing called stop and frisk a while back. I don't know how that panned out.
And you can see how if you have the information, you can use it to control. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what the example in China is. Mm-hmm. There are people that have an ideology. Their religion is better than another religion. Squash out the minority of the Uyghurs with their Muslim religion, and all this data is used against them. I think in America, we just think, well, the Constitution keeps us free, when you really just need some bad-minded folks.
And here's the worst part of it. We haven't even really touched on. Once it inevitably happens that our country is fully surveilled all the time, right?
As if it's not now.
But let's say it's right now, right? Mm-hmm. So, but once we know it, like as a society, we know it, right? Like, yep, there's cameras everywhere. The government's surveilling us. And I like to use the example. They come here and they show me a video of Tim walking into a church with a vest and blowing it up. Do you think there's any chance I go, that couldn't be Tim? But we know you could edit video to do anything you want. Mm-hmm. There's no truth in video. Mm-hmm. Like, go watch Avengers Endgame. There's zero truth in video. It looks 100% real. Guys are shooting lightning bolts and throwing, and it's like, it's all fake. So how could I trust anything I'm shown? And you go, well, the government surveilled Tim. He wasn't in his building. Tim could be like, no, Chris, it wasn't me. I was across town. I was doing that. And I go, hey, my buddy Tim said he was across town. They go, oh no, we have his cell phone data right here. Shows that he was at that church. Mm-hmm. Oh, so I have cell phone data. Oh, here's the text message where he texts the guy, hey, I'm going in the church to blow it up. I mean, how do you have any trust in anything when they say we have all the data and it all proves to this one thing? That's like the scariest part about it to me, is that it's I want to say it can be useful, but it was only useful if it was not being able to be manipulated. Mm-hmm.
Which is the difficult part. I mean, that's where you really wonder at least the idea of a document in the Constitution that has all these checks in place. But I think what we're seeing now is those checks are kind of being eroded.
Kind of?
You go, yeah, okay, I'm trying to be generous. But you're going around these things and you're like, really? America is just in need of a dictator to turn on all these systems, and then it's trouble.
So like somebody really authoritarian. Maybe runs one term, gets reelected.
I was like, it's interesting because, like I said, we're living in a time where like everyone believed that the rule of law in America and the Constitution and all these things were written so perfectly, and the checks and balances were there that you couldn't do what you want to do. But we're seeing currently that, well, if you have the right people in your administration, you do what you want to do. Who's going to stop you? The people in charge of those checks and balances.
I believe the greatest check and balance, and I know we've talked about this before, and this is like a new phenomenon for me, really understanding the power and the importance, is the freedom of press. Because it's much more likely that we stop these people through elections or through just exposing it than you will through the judicial branch. I mean, we see how easily the judicial branch swings when when 2 or 3 presidents get to name the justices. I mean, it can swing really quick. But what can expose that, and we've seen that even with John Roberts on the Supreme Court. He's voted wrong, in quotation marks, if you will, on several key things. And what I mean by that is, if you go read about John Roberts, we know he doesn't agree with how he voted. But I've read this really interesting article talking about the reason he voted that Obamacare was legal was not because he believes it is, but because he believes in the checks and balances of that system, and that he felt like the court was being abused. And it's like, well, that's an interesting place, because you're telling me he's not voting what he believes, which is what we put him there to do, but he's voting in a way because he believes in the benefit of that system. And I think we should be thankful for somebody like that on the court, even though it's like, well, I'm only thankful because he's voted a few ways I probably agree with. What if he was voting against? I would probably feel, hey, the system's not working.
Well, and you think about the Supreme Court, I mean, just to touch on that right quick, it's phenomenal that this whole country can be affected by, well, I'm not going to say 9 people, 5 people. I mean, think about that. That is
They're
so
talking
much
about
power.
reducing it.
Really?
It wasn't always 9. I just read this. This was new to me. It used to be an even number. And there's some people right now arguing it needs to go back. And I think
that's a lot of power.
But I think the argument is with the even number, it's a lot harder to get decisions. There's a lot more ties.
Well, of course, yes. But I say it is a lot of power, and so much so because it affects, like you said, we have the ability to hold people accountable through voting, supposedly. But we see that the Supreme Court greatly affects our ability to vote in a lot of ways. You look at gerrymandering, which makes the vote kind of irrelevant. Or you look at, take for example, Trump, he lost the popular vote, but he still was put in office. So when you take into account gerrymandering, when you take into account the rulings they made on for money in politics and all these things that change, or even the ability to vote. What was the rule it was a rule that they instituted back in the 60s, I want to say, about southern states, or maybe it was before the 60s, I can't remember even now, about southern states, in order for them to be able to change their voting laws, they had to go through, was it Congress? I don't remember anymore. I sound very ignorant, but it is what it is.
It's a little bit popular culture thing going on right now with the, Democrats are starting to form, for election, Buttigieg or whatever his name is. What's that guy's name? Buttigieg. I like what he's saying right now. They're all trying to give him grief for not having specifics. Like he hasn't given his specific view on taxes or abortion or gay marriage. Clearly he's pro-gay marriage or what those things are. But he hasn't given a lot of specifics. And he says, and I love his answer, he says, that's because our democratic process is broken. And I think it's much more important that we have a conversation about our democratic processes and about how we're going to fix those, because that is what results in these broken processes of things like abortion. And that's, I agree with, like right now, like we need to really kind of look and say, and not that we would change the overarching. I think it's a really good system. Is it perfect? Of course not. But we do have to look and say, if our Supreme Court is allowing gerrymandering, are they really applying the principles of the founding fathers? Like, was that really the idea? And so if you look at those principles, I think that you can start to sort out really quick. Like, we don't really need to talk about gerrymandering. We need to talk about what allows it. Mm-hmm. Because if we just talk about gerrymandering, we'll be right back here next year with with another problem.
And gerrymandering, just if anybody doesn't know what that means.
Basically, what is happening right now, where at the local level, like we think our national elections are national, but at the local level, that's really where we start to see the national, because they basically, if you win in a district, you get to start to draw the line of who's in that vote. And I forget, man, somebody, it might have been Buttigieg, I saw, said it so perfectly. Like when you have, I forget what it was. It was like when you have people deciding who votes, when you have people deciding who goes and represents them, that's the correct way it works. But right now we have people that are deciding who they're going to represent. So what they do is they get elected, and then they look at the way the demographics are shifting and say, man, if I want to get reelected, or my party, I need to draw this line a little different, because this group of people has been voting for me, but they're moving to the north. And so if you go look up like your congressional district, it'll look like some crazy kid drew the map. And usually it's drawn around a lot along demographic lines.
They want to break up voting bases so they don't have the power to actually vote someone into power. So like you look at a city like Austin, the districts are drawn so crazy because Austin is actually a very liberal city.
In a conservative state.
In a conservative state. But they draw the district such a crazy way to limit the liberals' ability to get in office. So even though the city has more liberals, more conservatives get voted into office based upon the districts. Same thing happened, I think, in like Wisconsin and Michigan, where the minority, like the conservatives got like 40% of the vote, but got 60% of the seats.
Yeah, and like here in Georgia, we saw a real example to me of the system not working. And if we're just honest, like forget whether you're Democratic or Republican, I don't know how you could have somebody running for the highest state position, governor, who also oversees the election as Secretary of State. Like that just doesn't even make common sense. And I would go back and say, and and it was Kemp here, had he resigned that position, which had always kind of been understood that you do, it would have been another Republican overseeing the election. But what I mean by that is elections are one of the most fragile things that a democracy has. And the fact that you have a legitimate election is more important than anything else. Because when we start to see this, we've had several last presidential elections where one side or the other feels like it's illegitimate, and that's a really scary thing. So that's where you take somebody like Kemp and they decide, you know what, I'm still going to oversee the election even though I'm running. Why? It just raises the question of fraud in a way that it wouldn't if you gave that position up. So to me, that's the system failing.
Well, I think right now you have a lot of people in this country who are seeing a lot of negative things, and they're like, you know what? Let me just get mine. Meaning, this guy's promised me a job, and what's the right thing to do if I was to think about my kids and grandkids? Don't oversee your own election. That sounds like we're in a third world country, and your cousin's running the ballot box, but it's really you. You're running the ballot box for you. So in a context in the third world, we'd say, oh, that's corruption, right? But here it's, yeah, but I don't want I don't want Stacey Abrams in office, right? And so we're using politics to trump morality, ethics, everything. Because it almost feels like, to me, everybody's like, got to get it while the getting's good.
And I don't understand the groups that do it to their own detriment someday. So like, you know,
but it's short-sightedness. They're not seeing their own detriment.
But it's like, it's just so crazy. Like, you're willing to ruin the system, but it could be used against you in one election cycle later.
But it rarely is.
Well, that's true.
Because, I mean, I know this makes come off as biased, but I tend to think that conservatives tend to twist the rules a bit more. And then they just continue to do it more and more each time. You know, just like you see the demographics in America are currently changing, but they still hold, you know, more, state seats and stuff like, you know, state legislatures. They still have the Senate because they gerrymander, they twist the rules. Just the same way, like Merrick Garland couldn't be, Obama couldn't nominate him for the Supreme Court because they said he, the lame duck session or whatever, supposedly. But then they go in and so they get two conservative Supreme Court justices in office. But that's the thing; they'll just continue to twist the system at every turn to their leaning. So, like I said, Brian Kemp, he was able to be run for governor and to be Secretary of State, but let a Democrat try to do it. I'm pretty sure that they'll find a way. Well,
that's why I get mad at people. It's like, just ask yourself if the shoe is on the other foot. Like, Brian Kemp did it. Let's say you're a big Brian Kemp supporter and you believe he's like real ethical guy. Of course you would see no problem. But voter fraud has no discrimination. Republicans think that Democrats do it, and Democrats think Republicans do it. So if Stacey Abrams had been in that position and she stayed Secretary of State, you don't think you, as a conservative Republican, would have been crying foul that she was going to let a bunch of illegal immigrants vote? Of course you would. Well, you would have immediately thought that.
Well, they said that already. They said that they leveled that claim to her.
Yeah, but that's imagine she was running the election.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how can you be so short-sighted when we see the demographics of Georgia shifting, that you would risk letting somebody, and again, whether it would or wouldn't happen, I'm just saying, what if somebody did get in office that said, you know what, I just wanted to list the election so bad, I am going to let a bunch of illegal immigrants vote, or whatever it is that you think is total voter fraud. It's like, you would be livid, but you could be the people. And in the past we have. I mean, like I said, I think it was unprecedented that a Secretary of State didn't relinquish their position. It's like, it was unheard of. And people, because it benefited their party, were okay with it.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. It's the same thing. Like, so
that's why I'm against government surveillance.
Yeah, there you go. Bring it back around.
I'm not sure how it ties in, but I am against government surveillance.
We stayed really on topic there.
Yeah. Any last thoughts?
My last thought is, and I like the idea, and I want to keep this idea being talked about, which is us being able to surveil our public servants, congressmen, senators, presidents. Like, I should have access. It's so easy these days with technology. Any phone call Donald Trump makes, I should be able to listen to live, as long as it's not classified. If he's calling his son, if he's in office, if he's sitting in the Oval Office, hey, let me listen. Meaning his son that's involved in policy, or his daughter. You know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Same thing, congressmen. They can record every conversation they have. Submit it, upload it right from their phone. It'd be the best spent money we have. I think we'd see fraud and abuse go to drastic lows. until they figure out how to abuse the system. But
Chris,
I do like it. Let's
running
keep it
for emperor 2030. You've been listening to Rhodium Radio. As you can see, we're having a good time, and we hope you are too. For more episodes like this, go to rhodiumradio.com. We'll see you next time.